In the Mishnah Masechta Avodah Zarah, speaking about Goyim, the Mishnah says, Lo yisyachid adam imoin, a Yid should not seclude himself, be himself with a Goy, because they are suspected of murdering the Yid, chas v'shalom. It's known in Poskim, says the Rebbe, that that's only referring to Goyim of earlier generations. These days, Goyim are not suspected regarding this. On the contrary, as we'll see later in the Sicha as well. Now the Gemara explains and gives some details about this. For example, if a Yid what a Yid needs to be careful with, the Gemara says if a Yid meets a Goy in the way, he should make sure that the Goy is going to be on his right side. That would be considered safer. And other examples that the Gemara says, as we'll see later in the Sicha. And then the Gemara says, if the Goy asks you where you're going, Yarchiv lo yasaderech, he should broaden the way. As Yaakov Avinu does to Esav HaRasha. The Pasuk says, Ad asher avay el adoini seira. Yaakov said to Esav, until I come to my master in Seir. But then the Pasuk says, Yaakov travels to Sukkos. Rashi explains, the Gemara, what does it mean, derech she'asa Yaakov, like what Yaakov did? That Yaakov told Esav, because of sakonas nefashos, because he felt in danger, Yaakov said to Esav something that was not exactly the way it was going to be. Because he says, Avay el adoini seira, till I come to my master in Seir. But then Yaakov only travels to Sukkos and does not go to Seir. From this we learn the halacha for every single Yid, that when a Goy asks you where you're going, you need to tell him not the accurate place to where you're going to. Rather, Yarchiv lo yasaderech, you tell him a more distant place. If you need to go only one parsa, a certain measure in distance, you tell him you're going 2 parsois. And perhaps the Goy will wait to strike the Yid until that second parsa, and by that time the Yid would have been gone already. He'll separate from him earlier. Now in the Medrash, on the same pasuk, Ad asher avay el adoini seira, says the Medrash, we searched all over Torah, and we didn't find that Yaakov ever went to Har Seir, to Esav. Says the Medrash, is it possible that Yaakov, who is so truthful, is being deceitful and tricking Esav? Rather, when in fact will Yaakov go to Esav? La'asid lavoi, as the pasuk says, va'olu meishim ba'artzion lishpeites haresav. Now from this medrash we see that Yaakov was saying right from the outset something that was completely true. And that's why the medrash says we don't find anywhere that Yaakov actually went to Esav. Now simply it seems like these two ideas of the Gemara and the medrash are completely different opinions. According to the Gemara, Yaakov saw a certain danger with Esav, and therefore Yaakov had to tell him that he's going to Seir even though he was not planning to go there. Whereas according to Medrash, it had nothing to do with Yaakov being afraid of Esav. He wasn't afraid of Esav. There's no reason for him to tell him something where he's going if he's not planning to go there. And therefore the Medrash has to understand. So why did Yaakov say he's going to Seir? And the Medrash explains, he meant that he's going to come, La'asid lavoi. Nevertheless, we find that Rashi in his Pirush on the Torah, on the Pasuk Ad asher avay el adoini seira, actually combines these two Pirushim, which again seem to be opposite Pirushim, or different Pirushim. Rashi says, here in Chumash, here chiv lo yaderech, that he broadened the way, shaloi hayadaiti lelechas, he was not planning to go, but only till Sukkos. So Yaakov says to himself, if he's planning to do anything bad to me, he'll wait till I come to him. And he didn't end up going. And then Rashi immediately continues, Ve'emos hayelich, and when will he go? When Mashiach comes, as the Pasuk says, V'olu Mashiach ba'artziyah and lishpetes haresav. In other words, that the way Rashi is learning is that this explanation of the Gemara, that Yaakov was not planning to go to Seir, and he only said it in order to broaden the way so that Esav shouldn't harm him. According to Rashi, this fits with the Medrash that says that what Yaakov said was actually true because he's going to go in the time of Mashiach, that La'asid lavoi, he's going to come to Har Seir. So the Rebbe's question is that over here Rashi in Chumash is learning that Yaakov said the truth, and yet in the Gemara Rashi himself says that when Hirchiv lo haderech by Yaakov, we learn out from this that you could actually say something that's untrue in order to protect yourself from the Goy. So Mefarshim learn that even though it's true we do learn it from Yaakov, nevertheless, since Yaakov himself is midas ha'emes, as the Medrash itself emphasized, Yaakov amiti hoya, So therefore, even when he said an expression that Esav understood to be something different than what he really meant, nevertheless, Yaakov ends up saying only the truth. As far as other Yidden that are not on the level of Yaakov, we can learn out from that you could actually say something that's untrue because of the sakana. Says the Rebbe, but it's very difficult to learn this because the lashon of the Gemara is Yarchiv lo yasaderech, that the Yid should broaden the way for the goy, like Yaakov did. In other words, the Yarchiv lo yasaderech by every person is the same way as Yaakov did. So then how can we learn from there that we can be more lenient while Yaakov said something that was true ultimately? From this we should be able to learn that a Yid could say something that's totally untrue. Says the Rebbe, we're going to understand this by first looking into Rashi's words in Chumash, where Rashi starts off his explanation with these words, Hirchiv loy haderech, that he broadened the way for him. Seemingly these words are just extra, they're unnecessary. It would have seemingly been enough if Rashi just said the continuation. In other words, on the words, Ad asher avei el adoini seira, when Yaakov says, until I come to my master in Seir, Rashi could have continued and said, that Omar, Yaakov said, if he's planning to do anything harmful to me, he'll wait until I come, and then he didn't end up coming. So why does Rashi add these words, Hirchiv lo yaderech? Says the Rebbe, with these words, Hirchiv lo yaderech, Rashi is coming to clarify right in the beginning of his Pirush, that when Yaakov said, Ad asher avei el adoini seira, he actually didn't say anything that was untrue. This is again Rashi in Chumash. We're going to see that Rashi in Gemara is different. So when he says Hirchiv lo yaderech, he says something 100% true. He was only Hirchiv lo yaderech. He was only broadening the way. But what does that mean, broadening the way? That the road is becoming wider. It's becoming broader. That is, Yaakov did not mean to say that he's going on a further place than he's planning to go. Because then it should have said, Herich lo haderech. What does Hirchiv lo haderech mean? As the Rebbe clarifies also in the footnote over here. The word Hirchiv means, in other words, the actual road is the same distance. But within one place itself, you're staying there for longer. It's in a more expansive or a broader way. You're staying in one place for longer. In other words, the length of the journey is the same. But the derech, the way is becoming broader. That means it's going to take more time. There's going to be pauses. There's going to be stops. There's going to be delays. As says the Rebbe, it's anyways. This is the pshat of what happens in the pasuk. Yaakov clearly says to Esav, I'm going to be going slow because of the work that I have, because of the children. In other words, the whole journey is going to be a slow journey, stopping more often because of the work and the children, until eventually he will come. El adoini seira. So again, Hirchiv lo yaderech, the Rebbe is saying the pshat of these words is not that he's telling him he's going to go somewhere where he's not planning to go. Hirchiv lo yaderech means he's telling Esav it's going to take a long time. It's within the same distance, but it's going to take a long time. So in other words, when Rashi then finishes off, that when is he going to end up going to be Mois HaMashiach? It's not in contradiction to what Rashi said in the beginning, here Yarchiv lo yasaderech. In other words, originally we thought Yarchiv lo yasaderech means I'm telling you I'm going to go one place and I don't end up going there. And then the question is, how does that fit with what Rashi said? He's going to go in the times of Mashiach. So the Rebbe says there's no contradiction. Rashi is actually explaining the Hirchiv lo yasaderech. When Yaakov said it's going to take me, I'm going to get to Har Seir, and it's going to take me a long time, Rashi is explaining. So when is he actually going to get to Har Seir? The point of this journey is going to be when Mashiach comes. Now the Rebbe preempts a question which could arise over here, because Rashi does say that loy hayadaita leches ela atzukah, that he was only planning to go to Sukkos, which we would have understood previously, and we thought it means that he was only planning to go to Sukkos, and then he's planning to go to Seir, and really he was only planning to go to Sukkos. But the Rebbe says no. Yaakov does not mean over here that I'm only planning. The pasuk does not mean, Rashi does not mean that Yaakov was only planning to go to Sukkos and not further, because that's the opposite of what says clearly in the pasuk. That Yaakov does go further. He goes to Shechem and so on. There's a lot of places where he goes. Rather, what Rashi is saying is that this current journey right now, the current next stop that he's going, as Esav is going to Seir, So Yaakov is now planning to go only to Sukkos, and then he's going to spend some time there. As Rashi says clearly, Yaakov spent there 18 months. In other words, it's a delay along the road. But it's not that he's only planning to go to Sukkos and not to Seir. So again, in summary, the way the Rebbe explained to Rashi is that Yaakov is telling Esav, I'm going to Seir. And it's true, it's 100% true he's going to Seir. It's going to be when Mashiach comes. Here, Chivloi HaDerech means Yaakov is telling Esav, it's going to take me time. I'm on my way. I'm going to get there. It's going to take me a long time. And when it says that he went to Sukkos, that's just explaining this is part of the process. Right now I'm going to Sukkos. He didn't tell this to Esav that he's going to Sukkos. But Bepoil, that's what ends up happening. He goes to Sukkos and he delays there, etc., etc. Says the Rebbe, but according to all of this, we need to understand the other way around. Why is it that in Rashi, in the Gemara, Rashi over there explains that if you're planning to go one parsa, tell the guy you're going 2 parsois. In other words, saying something that's untrue. And furthermore, since we learned this from Yaakov, Kederech Sha'asa Yaakov, that must mean that according to Rashi and the Gemara, that's exactly what Yaakov did. He told Esav something that he's not planning to do. So how does that fit with the explanation we just said that he told Esav 100% the truth, I'm going to say, or he also told Esav, it's going to take me time. Says the Rebbe, we also need to understand the difference between Rashi in Gemara and Rashi ala Torah. That is, in Rashi and the Gemara, on the words Yarchiv lo yesaderech, Rashi says that by saying, I'm going 2 parsois, where really he was only planning to go 1, Rashi says, perhaps the guy will wait to strike him until that second parsa. Which from this wording, it seems implied that it's quite obvious that the guy is going to strike him. That's definitely the plan of the guy. And by saying, I'm going 2 parsois, then perhaps the guy will wait from striking him. And again, since we compare it to Yaakov, it seems that we're saying that by Yaakov was also sure that Esav was out to harm him. But when we look in Pirushei ala Torah and Rashi's Pirush and Chumash, by Hirchiv loy haderech, by Yaakov, Rashi says, the words are precise. Rashi says, Omar Yaakov said, Im daitoi lasois lira, if he has in mind to do anything bad to me, then he will wait till I get to him. In other words, we're only preempting a doubt. Im daitoi lasois lira, in case he might do something bad to me. In other words, it's not definite that Esav wants to do bad to him. And the Rebbe says, we can say that this will actually make a difference in halacha as well. In other words, in a case where you're in doubt whether the guy is going to do harm to you, do you then use this eitzah of lying to the guy and saying you're going to go to a further place? Or in that sort of case, when you're not sure, maybe you should try at least to look for some other solution. In other words, does it depend, to say a lie, does it depend how sure you are what the guy is going to do? So again, the main question over here right now we're up to is the difference between Rashi and the Gemara and Rashi and Chumash. Says the Rebbe, the explanation is, we discussed a number of times that Rashi sticks to Derech HaPshat. This is both in Chumash and in Shas. But in his Pirush on Torah, as Rashi says, Basi l'pshutei shel mikra, I'm coming to explain the simple pshat of the pasuk. In his explanation, on Shas, he's coming to explain the simple pshat of the Gemara. Even if the simple pshat of the Gemara is not going to fit with the simple pshat of the pasuk. So now we have to look each place in its own and then understand what Rashi explained. In the Gemara, this idea of being with the goy on the road is coming in the sugya of the goyim being suspected for murder, which simply means that when a goy is asking, once you know already this idea that a goy is suspected for murder, if the goy now turns to you and say, where are you going? So since this guy is suspected for murder, this itself that he's asking, where are you going, is a sign that he's planning to do something harmful to you. Similarly, in the way the Gemara, when the Gemara says the story of Yaakov, the Gemara says, Kederach shasa Yaakov avinu la'esav harasha. We're emphasizing that he was a rasha. In other words, the fact that Yaakov said something that was not accurate the way it was going to be was because he's dealing with a rasha, with Esav a rasha, and therefore, since he's dealing with a rasha, he understands that Esav wants to do something bad to him. That's all in the Gemara. Whereas in Pshutei Shel Mikra, when we read the simple psukim, it's not so obvious that Esav wants to do anything bad to Yaakov. On the contrary, starting from the pasuk in the beginning of this whole idea, it says, Vayoretz Esav, Esav runs towards Yaakov. He hugs him. He falls on his neck and he kisses him. The whole continuation of everything that Esav says is all in a way of friendship, of love. And specifically this is so when Yaakov, in connection to what Yaakov had said, Avoy el Adoni Siro. What was that in response to when he says, I'm going to come to Seir? This is when Esav said, let's travel together, I'll come together with you. As Rashi says, Toiv v'zu, I'm going to do this favor for you. In other words, I'll be nice to you, we'll travel together. So therefore, it's not obvious that Esav wants to do anything bad, it's just some sort of suspicion. Because after all, for many years, Esav hated Yaakov. Esav was Yaakov's enemy. So therefore, he wants to be a little bit more cautious, and therefore the expression is, Im daitoi la'asos lira, if he's going to do something bad to me. If he's planning to do something bad to me. Says the Rebbe, this will now explain to us the difference between Rashi and Chumash and Rashi al Hashas. If we're speaking about a situation, a goy or Rasha that's suspected for shvichos damim, for murder, like Esav HaRasha, as the Gemara emphasizes, Esav HaRasha. So if a goy that's suspected for murder asks you, where are you going? Then that's indicating that he has bad plans. It's a situation of danger. And therefore, we need to use a method, even something that's not true, in order to be saved from the sakana. And that's why, as Rashi explains in the Gemara, if you're planning to go 1 parsa, tell him you're going 2 parsois. Because with this, you're going to delay the danger. The goy is going to wait from striking till the second parsa, till the second distance. And in the meantime, you'll manage to get away. So that's all in the Gemara, when it's more sure that the goy wants to harm you. Whereas in Pshutei Shel Mikra, where we're speaking about a doubt and it's only a little bit of a suspicion, as Rashi says, Im daitoi la'asos lira. So in order to remove just this little suspicion, so it's enough to say, Ad asher avoy el Adoni seira, in a way of not lying, saying you're going to go to a place you're not planning to go, but rather hirchiv lo haderech, which, as we explained before already, in Rashi, in the simple words, hirchiv lo haderech, is just saying, it's going to take a long time, I'm going to delay, it's going to take me a long time, etc. Says the Rebbe, from the amazing things in the halacha area that we could take out of this Rashi, the Rebbe says, according to this way of understanding Rashi, hirchiv lo haderech, that not that you're giving a place further than you're planning to go, but rather you're broadening this journey itself, this road itself. Based on this, we'll be able to explain a Rambam in the way the Rambam discusses this halacha. And the Rebbe now quotes the Rambam. Im sha'aloi, if the guy asks you where are you going, yarchiv lo yesaderech, you should broaden the way. Kederech she'irchiv Yaakov le'esav, as Yaakov did for Esav. As it says, Ad asher avoy el Adoni seira. So the Rebbe asks, the Rambam is a sefer of halachis, a sefer where halachis need to be clearly brought out in order to know how one needs to act practically. So why doesn't the Rambam explain what these words mean, Yarchiv lo yasaderech, to broaden the road? As the Mefarshim and the Gemara explain. And so too in halacha, the Beis Yosef and Shulchan Aruch says the din clear, that if the guy asks you where are you going, if you need to go 1 parsa, say you're going 2 parsois. Says the Rebbe, at least bedoichik, we would be able to say that according to Rambam, Yarchiv lo haderech actually includes 2 things. Yarchiv includes, well, first of all, saying where you're going, what you're planning to do, but it also includes something else. It includes the idea of maisa, more of an action. Yarchiv lo haderech could possibly mean that you should physically remove yourself from the goy. In other words, along the way, try to distance yourself from the goy. Maybe that's what Yarchiv lo haderech means. Similar to the pasuk, V'revach tosimu bein eder la'eder. This is the pasuk that Yaakov said about separating between the groups of the shepherds and the sheep, making a lot of space between them, etc. The Rebbe says, if that's the case, it was speaking more about the action, Yarchiv lo haderech, physically distancing yourself. The Rebbe says, this could then, if we learn like this would make more geschmack, a certain diuk in the wording of the Rambam, where the Rambam says, Kederech she'irchiv Yaakov le'esav, shene'emar ad asher avoy el Adoni seira. Seemingly, it would have been more precise to say, and as the Tosefta actually says, like She'omar, like Yaakov said, Ad Asher Avay Ladoini Sira. Why does it say She'ne'emar? So the Rebbe is learning because we're not only speaking about what Yaakov said, we're speaking about Kederech Shehirchiv Yaakov, that Yaakov actually distances himself. So maybe that's the pshat of when the Rambam says Yarchiv Lo Yaderech, it means that you should physically distance yourself. But says the Rebbe, in addition to the fact that this is a doiche godel, it's very difficult to learn pshat like this, says the Rebbe, in addition to that, this idea that when you're with a goy, you should distance yourself from the goy if he's suspected for murder, this is something that the Rambam had already anyways said in the previous halacha, and the halacha before this, you should try not to go along with a goy in the road. So therefore, says the Rebbe, it makes more sense to say that Yarchiv Lo Yas HaDerech, according to the Rambam, is specifically speaking about what you're going to say to the goy in response to his asking, where are you going? But if that's the case, we're back to square one to the question, so why doesn't the Rambam explain what this Yarchiv Lo Yas HaDerech means? He doesn't give this example of if you're going to go one parsa, say 2 parsois, and so on. The Rebbe now also looks at some other diyukim in the wording of the Rambam. Number 1, the pasuk the Rambam brings about Yaakov. He says, Ad Asher Avay El Adoini Seira. But the Rambam does not bring the other pasuk that the Gemara brings, that what does Yaakov practically do? V'Yaakov nasa Sukkos, that instead Yaakov goes to Sukkos. Seemingly, says the Rebbe, the whole proof that by saying Ad Asher Avay El Adoini Seira, Yaakov was actually broadening the road, is from the other pasuk, V'Yaakov nasa, that where does Yaakov travel? Not to Seir, but to Sukkos. And yet the Rambam leaves out that pasuk. What do we have from the pasuk Ad Asher Avay El Adoini Seira? Question number 2. In the Gemara, the expression is Kederech She'osa Yaakov, like Yaakov did. The Rambam changes, and he says Kederech Shehirchiv Yaakov. Number 3, in the Gemara, the expression is Yaakov Avinu did Esav Harasha, and Rambam omits, he takes out these titles and just says like Yaakov did to Esav. Says the Rebbe, but based on the way we explained Rashi and Chumash, what Yarchiv Lo Yaderech means, we can now explain that the Rambam actually also learns this way in Yarchiv Lo Yas HaDerech by every single yid. That, in other words, when the goy asks you where are you going, you should broaden the way in which you're going, which means, in other words, that you're going to say it's going to take a long time till I get to the destination where I'm going. In other words, in time it's going to take long. What's that going to achieve? What's going to happen is that this will then hopefully make that the goy should give up on his plans of doing anything bad when he comes, by the time this yid comes there, because he has no idea how long it's going to take till the yid is going to get there, how long it's going to take him along the road. The yid is telling him it's going to take me a long time till I get to my destination. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand the wording of the Rambam, Kederech Shehirchiv Yaakov LaEsav, Shene'emar Ad Asher Avay El Adoini Seira, which we just had a few questions on that. Because the broadening of the road by Yaakov was by saying, Ad Asher Avay El Adoini Seira. In other words, that is the whole proof. He says, until I will eventually come to Seir. In other words, it's going to take some undefined amount of time, because I have the children with me and the work, until I get there. And from this we learned that by every single yid, you should also say it in a way that you're broadening the way. In other words, again, that it's going to take you time till you get to your destination. Not that you're telling him a wrong place. And therefore, says the Rebbe, it's not relevant anymore, the pasuk, that where does Yaakov practically go? He's going to Sukkos. All that matters is this pasuk, he says, I'm going to eventually get to Seir, meaning it's going to take me a long time. Says the Rebbe, now we understand also why Rambam didn't mention the words Yaakov Avinu and Esav Harasha. Because according to the Rambam, the fact that Yaakov is sort of being extra careful by broadening the way to Esav is not because he's sure that Esav is a Rasha, he wants to do bad to him. You know, it's not because of there's a definite evil over here, because as we said, on the contrary, at that point, it seems like Esav was showing brotherliness and love to Yaakov, as we explained before in Rashi and Chumash. And therefore we're saying it's just being extra cautious on Yaakov's part. Says the Rebbe, we still need to understand, how we can learn the Rambam in this way, because let's look further into the Gemara. The Gemara, right after this din, that says that if the guy asks you where are you going, you should broaden the road. The Gemara brings 2 stories from which it is quite obvious and almost explicit that the pshat of Yarchiv is as Rashi explains in the Gemara. which is that you should actually tell him a place where you're not planning to go. And therefore the question is going to end up being, how could the Rambam learn differently? And this is what the Gemara says. Ma'aseh b'talmidei Rabbi Akiva is a story with the students of Rabbi Akiva. They were going to a place called Kziv. Along the way, some bandits encountered them. The bandits say to them, where are you going? So they say, we're going to Aku. Now on the road, as they come to Kziv, the Talmidim are now leaving. In other words, they deceived the robbers, the bandits. So the bandits say to the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, whose students are you? They say, Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. And they say, wow, fortunate is Rabbi Akiva and his Talmidim that no bad person was ever able to harm them. The Gemara then brings another very similar story with Rabbi Menashe that was going to a place called Beit Turta, and robbers met him, etc. A very similar sort of continuation, like in the previous story with Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. Now, simply these stories in the Gemara are coming as a proof and showing a practical way how this all played out in the previous din of if the guy asks you where are you going, you should broaden the way from him. Because from these stories we actually see how broadening the way actually saved them. And in that case, they definitely said something that was untrue. In other words, they were saying a place further than they were planning to go. And therefore, seemingly you can't learn in the Gemara, the Pshat, Yarchiv, is anything but saying a lie. You know, you can't say that the Pshat is not to say a lie by telling him a further place. Instead, just broadening the road. As we explained before, he's speaking about the same road, and it's just going to take you a longer time. So therefore the question becomes, how could we possibly say that that's the way the Rambam understands the Gemara, and based on that, paskening the halacha like this? Says the Rebbe that the Rashi and the Rambam are actually, they have different opinions about what the sakana exactly is, to what extent the sakana is, when the goy asks him, where are you going to? In other words, the Rambam and Rashi are going to learn this Gemara slightly different. Because you can understand it in two ways. You might say that when the guy asks you, where are you going, it's basically the same type of danger of the previous halachos that the Gemara was discussing. That's one way of learning. Or you could say, no, when the guy asks you, where are you going, this has a special gather. This is a whole new deal already. So that is, going back to the previous Gemara, we said that the goyim generally are suspected for shvichas damim, for murder. And therefore, there's a number of dinim in which a yid needs to be careful of. So some of the examples are, again, he shouldn't seclude himself with a goy. If a goy encounters him on the way, he should try to make sure the goy is on the right side. If they are going up a mountain or down a mountain, to always make sure that the yid is higher up and the goy is lower down, the yid shouldn't be lower and the goy higher. So you might say that when the Gemara then discusses, if the goy asks you where you're going, you might say, well, this is just another one of the examples. It's another one of the same category, the same group, of which a yid needs to be cautious of the goy because of a general suspicion of that what goyim might do. That's one way of learning it. Another way of learning it is, no, if the goy asks you where are you going, it's totally different. It's much stricter, it's much more severe than the other dinim in the Gemara, which are based just on a general assumption that the goyim are suspected for shvichas damim. Rather, again, the second way of learning is that if he asks you where are you going, then this is mamash, a clear proof that the goy wants to harm you. By the fact that he's asking you where are you going, it now went out from just a general suspicion of goyim generally, but rather now it became what we might call bari hazeka. Now the harm, the danger is very, very clear. It's absolute. Says the Rebbe, what would be a practical difference between these two ways? Or one of the practical differences between these two ways? Says the Rebbe is going to apply this now to Zman Hazeh, to nowadays. According to the Poskim, the Bizman Hazeh, Goyim are actually not suspected for Shvichas Damim. In other words, it's not common for Goyim just to go and kill Yidden. And on the contrary, they punish, they give capital punishment even for a murderer. In other words, they have courts of justice, etc. So these days, goyim are not suspected. You don't just suspect any goy for murder. And therefore you would say, Bizman hazeh, we don't have so much this isur of secluding yourself with a goy and these other things that the Gemara discussed. But now, what about this particular case? If the goy is asking you where you're going, if we understand that the idea of yarchiv lo haderech, broadening the way, is just part of the general suspicion that we had with goyim, then bizman hazeh, when we say that goyim are not really suspected in the same way for shvichas damim, then automatically there's no problem either if he asks you where are you going, and you don't have to use this method of yarchiv lo haderech. On the other hand, if we say that when he asks you where you're going, it's not only a suspicion, but right now it's already a certain danger, then you would need to have yarchiv lo haderech bizman hazeh as well. So now let's go back to Rashi and the Rambam explain how they understand the Gemara, their argument. Rashi in his pirush on the Gemara, he's going with the second way as we just explained. That when the guy asks you where are you going, then this guy has a special din now that it's much more obvious that he definitely wants to cause you harm. And Rashi is learning this from the simple reading of the Gemara. Because, as we just said, there are these two stories that come after this halach in the Gemara. The two stories when bandits and robbers meet these people, these Amoraim, and therefore the Gemara learns, according to the way Rashi's understanding of the simple reading of the Gemara, that when the guy asks you where are you going, this guy is now considered, in a sense, absolutely certain, similar to these bandits and robbers. And therefore Rashi and the Gemara learns that you need to make sure as much as possible, make sure that absolutely nothing's going to happen. You need to take all sorts of methods. In other words, not just say something in order for the goy to stop thinking to harm you or whatever or anything like that, but you mamish have to go out in a clear way and deceive the goy. If you're planning to go one parsa, say you're going 2 parsas, maybe the goy will then wait from striking you until the second parsa, and you will manage to get away from him before that. Says the Rebbe, and this we learn out, as Yaakov Avinu did to Esav Harosha, as Yaakov Avinu actually did. Again, the way we're understanding it, based on this Gemara. And as we clearly see in this story that the Gemara brings, it's called Ma'aser Rav. In other words, we saw this happening practically, that even in a case where the Goyim Taka asked, the bandits Taka asked them, and it was Bari Azeka, this was clear bandits. It was definite danger. And yet, this advice actually helped to get rid of the danger. These people were saved. That's all Rashi's view of the Gemara. But the Rambam holds that since this din of the Goy asking where you're going is coming in continuation to all the previous dinim in the Gemara, which we said already before, those dinim doesn't mean that it's absolute definite danger. So that tells you that this din, where he asks you where you're going, is also not in the category of absolute danger. In other words, it's just a detail within the general category of goyim being suspected for shvichas damim. And therefore the Rambam says that the way of going about yarchiv lo haderech is not, as we said before, that you have to tell him a lie. Rather, the way Yaakov did for Esav when he said, which we explained as meaning, at the way Rashi and Chumash learns, just broadening the way in which you're going anyways. In other words, don't tell him your very next stop that you're making right now. Rather, telling him you have a broad way, meaning it's going to take me quite some time until I get to my ultimate destination. And by this, you'll get rid of the sakana, as we explained. And again, this will be similar to the situation of Yaakov and Esav, which is the way we learned simply the Chumash, where there wasn't a situation that there was a definite danger from Esav's because of Esav. On the contrary, he was acting in a way of love, as discussed previously at length. Are you going to say then, according to the Rambam, what's the point of these two stories that come right afterwards? Says the Rebbe, according to the Rambam, this is now a new halacha, this is a new din, that if in fact there is a certain danger, like in a case where you're meeting bandits or robbers, then the halacha would be not yarchiv lo haderech, like by a regular goy, not just telling him, it's going to take me time till I go. But rather, in this particular case, then the Yid would give a place much further than he's planning to go, because by that, maybe the goy will wait with harming him until the further place, and in the meantime, we'll be able to get away from him. The Rebbe now turns to all of the biur b'pnimi yisay inyanim. The Rebbe says generally it's known that when we learn in Torah one thing from another, So the pshat is, what it means is that the thing where you're learning it out from is actually the cause for that thing that you're learning out from it. In other words, when we learn one thing from another, it means this thing actually originates from the other thing where it's coming from. And the Rebbe applies this in our case. The fact that a Yid in all times and in all generations is saved from a goy, from the goyim that ask the Yid, where are you going? It is because, b'penimius, there's this idea, derech shehir chiv Yaakov. It's b'penimius, all connected to what Yaakov Avinu said, ad asher avoy el adoini seira. What does this mean? Says the Rebbe, the fact that a goy and goyishkeit could ever have any sort of power over a Yid, chas v'shalom, is only when a Yid acts in a way as if Golus is his place. And therefore the Goy thinks that in fact, in truth, he has power over the Yid. But when a Yid acts in a way of marchiv loy haderech, which means he says to the Goy that the fact that I'm in Golus over here is just a delay in middle of the road. In fact, like Yaakov Avinu, each and every Yid, we're all on the way, ad asher avoy el adoini seira, we're on the way to the Geula. And then it's going to be exactly the opposite of Olam Yishim Ba'artzi and Lishpitas HaReisav, that the Yidden are going to get up there and judge and punish Esav. And V'hoisel Hashem Amlucha. When a Yid views the whole Golus that it's only a preparation, it's on the road to the Geula. We're in the middle of the avoid of elevating the world to break the darkness of the world. Through Neir Mitzvah V'Torah, to prepare the world to the Geula HaSidu, and V'hoyash L'cha Hashem Lo Yeroilem, and Hashem will be our light forever. And V'hol Goyim Lo Yerich, and the Goyim are going to go by your light. The glory of Hashem will be revealed. And everyone will see that it's Hashem's mouth that spoke. And then, by this preparation to the Geula, the koyach of goyishkeit is bottled. And therefore the goy doesn't have his power. He doesn't have the power over the Yid. And then what happens is, that by Yidden themselves come into a state of menucha, that even as they're going on this journey, through Golus to the Geula, even before they reach the beginning of the Geula, it's already, as the pasuk says, Vayavoy Yaakov Sholem, Yaakov arrives completely. Ir Shem, and as it's explained that this means he comes complete in his gulf, complete with his money, complete with his Torah, meaning by Yidden, that Yidden come and they are healthy and complete with their body physically, literally, and with their money, and with Bonei Chaya, children, health, and abundance parnasa. And with their Torah, they learn Torah b'menucha, in a way of complete in Torah. Complete meaning the Torah is complete, learning both Nigla the Torah and Pnimiyas HaTorah, which in our generation was revealed in Torah Achsidus, and it's in a way of Torah Achas, it's all one Torah, a complete Torah. So all of this hastens Bias Mashiach Tzidkeinu, when it'll be Mekuyim. As we said earlier, the Avoy El Adoini Seira, when it will be fulfilled, V'Olam Yishim Ba'artzi and Lishpitas HaReisav, V'Hoisel Hashem Hamlucha, B'Meheira V'Yameinu Mamash.